Her name was Marisol, and she was 41 years old when her father passed away and left her the house she grew up in, the only home she had ever truly known. It sat on a quiet street lined with oak trees, the kind of street where every porch light meant something and every neighbor had a name you'd known since childhood. Marisol never imagined that the person who would try to take that house from her would be the woman living right next door, a woman her family had trusted for over 20 years. What happened to her over the following year would test everything she believed about loyalty, and by the end of this story, you will understand exactly how far a person can go when they convince themselves that love and ownership are the same thing. The neighbor's name was Denise. She had lived beside Marisol's parents since before Marisol was born, in the pale yellow house with the wraparound porch, the one with wind chimes that used to keep Marisol awake on summer nights when her window was left open. Growing up, Marisol called her Aunt Denise, even though they shared no blood at all. Denise used to babysit Marisol when her parents worked late shifts at the hospital. She taught a young Marisol how to plant tomatoes in the small garden bed behind the fence, kneeling beside her in the dirt, patient in a way exhausted parents sometimes couldn't be. When Marisol was 12, Denise sat with her on the porch steps and helped her practice multiplication tables long after most adults would have given up on a stubborn child who kept getting the sevens wrong. When Marisol's mother was diagnosed with cancer, Denise was the one who brought soup to their door twice a week, who sat with her during the long afternoons when treatment left her too exhausted to even speak. She never once made it feel like an obligation. She made it feel like love, the steady, unglamorous kind that shows up on a Tuesday afternoon with a covered dish and asks for nothing back. Marisol's father used to say that some neighbors are just relatives you get to choose, and for years, Marisol believed Denise was exactly that. She had no reason to doubt her, not once, not in over 30 years of knowing her name. Marisol's mother passed when Marisol was 28. Her father lived another 13 years after that, alone in the house, tending the same garden Denise had once helped plant. Denise stayed close to him the entire time, checking in every few days, bringing dinner on Sundays, making sure he took his heart medication, driving him to appointments once his eyesight began to fail at night. Marisol lived 2 hours away by then, building a career in logistics, visiting when she could but never as often as she should have, always telling herself there would be more time later. Denise filled a space Marisol couldn't always fill herself, and Marisol was grateful, more than words could ever really carry. But there were small things, if you looked closely enough, things that only made sense afterward. Denise mentioning more than once how much the property taxes on the street had climbed over the years. Denise asking Marisol's father, casually, over dinner, what his plans were for the house someday, whether Marisol would even want to keep it given how far away she lived. At the time, these felt like ordinary neighborly conversation, the kind people have after 2 decades of knowing each other. No one thought to wonder why she was asking, or how long she might have been quietly collecting answers to questions nobody realized were questions at all. When Marisol's father passed away suddenly of a heart attack one Tuesday morning while watering that same garden, Denise was the first person at the hospital besides Marisol herself. She stood beside her at the funeral, holding her hand through the entire service, and afterwards she told her, quietly, that she would help her through everything that came next. Marisol believed her completely. In the middle of the worst grief of her life, she felt lucky to have someone who understood exactly what that house and that street meant to her, someone who had known her father as long as Marisol had known herself. The house needed work. Marisol's father hadn't kept up with much in his final years, understandably, grief over his wife and age slowing him down the way they do. The roof had been patched more times than it should have been. The wiring was original to the house, decades old, the kind that made an electrician wince at first glance. The plumbing groaned every time water ran for more than a few minutes. Marisol didn't have the money to fix everything at once, not on top of funeral costs and estate expenses already piling up faster than expected, probate fees and appraisal costs and back taxes she hadn't known existed. Denise offered to help her find a contractor she trusted, someone who had done work on her own home years before and done it well. Relief washed over Marisol when she heard it because she didn't know where to start, and the idea of vetting contractors alone while grieving her father felt genuinely impossible some mornings. She told Denise she would appreciate it more than she could say. Denise smiled and told her not to worry about a thing, that she would handle the introductions while Marisol focused on the estate paperwork and the endless calls to the county clerk's office. A few days later, Denise introduced her to a man named Roy. He was in his 50s, soft-spoken, dressed neatly in a collared shirt even on a Saturday, carrying a clipboard and a folder of professional-looking documents, letterhead and everything. Denise told Marisol that Roy was an old family friend, reliable, fair-priced, someone who wouldn't take advantage of a woman going through a loss like hers, someone who had redone Denise's own roof and kitchen years earlier without a single complaint. Marisol shook his hand in her father's living room, surrounded by boxes she hadn't finished sorting, and felt, for the first time in weeks, like someone was finally lifting a burden instead of adding to it. Roy walked through the house with her, pointing out roof damage, outdated wiring, a section of subfloor near the kitchen that felt soft underfoot when he pressed his boot into it. He spoke with the kind of confidence that made you stop questioning the details, the confidence of someone who has said the same reassuring words to 100 grieving homeowners before. He handed her a contract that same afternoon, already drafted, already priced down to the dollar, and told her if she wanted to lock in the quote before material costs rose that spring, she should sign soon, ideally that week. Denise stood beside her the entire time, nodding along with everything he said, telling her this all sounded fair, that Roy had always done right by everyone she'd ever sent his way. Marisol signed that same day. She read through it, but not as carefully as she should have, skimming past clauses she didn't fully understand because the language felt dense in the way legal documents always do. She trusted that Denise's decades of friendship with her family meant she wouldn't let anyone take advantage of her. She trusted Denise's judgment more than her own instincts, more than the small, quiet part of her that noticed how quickly everything had moved, how the contract had appeared already finished before she'd even asked for one. That was the first mistake, though she wouldn't understand how deep it went until many months later. For the first few weeks, everything seemed completely normal. Roy's crew arrived on schedule most mornings, tore off sections of the old roof, replaced damaged beams, worked steadily before packing up and leaving quietly each afternoon. Denise checked in constantly during this time, texting most days to ask how the estate paperwork was going, stopping by some evenings with a plate of food still warm from her oven. Sitting with Marisol on the porch while she cried about her father in a way she hadn't let herself cry in front of anyone else, not even her own sister on the phone. It's worth pausing here to say something directly to you, because some of you watching have lost a parent, or you will one day, and this matters more than almost anything else in this story. Grief does not just make a person sad. It makes them slower to notice things. It makes them trust people faster than they normally would because they are desperate for someone, anyone, to carry even a small part of the weight pressing down on them every morning when they wake up and remember all over again. That desperation is exactly what made Marisol vulnerable that year, and it is exactly what Denise, whether she planned it from the very beginning or simply recognized an opportunity as it slowly presented itself, understood about her better than Marisol understood it about herself. The roof work finished in the third week, and Roy told her it looked good, better than expected given the age of the house. Marisol felt a small, quiet pride, like her father would have been relieved to see the house cared for properly again. Denise agreed enthusiastically, telling her that her father would be proud of how she was handling everything alone. She didn't know yet that the roof was never really the project that mattered. The roof was simply the door that let Roy, and by extension Denise, into every corner of her finances, her routine, and her trust. By the start of the second month, Roy called one evening to say the crew had found more problems than expected while working on the wiring near the kitchen. He said it was structural, something with the load-bearing wall behind the pantry, something that would cost significantly more than originally agreed to fix properly and safely. He said it apologetically, sighing audibly on the phone, the way someone breaks bad news they clearly didn't want to deliver, and for a moment Marisol actually felt sorry for him. Imagine that, feeling sorry for the man quietly helping to take her house out from under her one phone call at a time. He told her she needed to sign an addendum to cover these new costs, and suggested they go over it together at her kitchen table. The same table her father had eaten breakfast at every single morning of his life in that house. The same table where she'd done her homework as a child while Denise waited on the porch outside. Denise came over that same afternoon, sitting right there with them, nodding along as Roy explained the addendum line by line in a calm, patient tone that made it all sound routine, unavoidable. Simply the reality of owning a house built decades before either of them were born. This always happens with old houses, Denise told her, patting her hand across the table the way she used to when Marisol struggled with multiplication as a girl. Your father put off so much maintenance those last few years, bless him. This isn't Roy's fault, it's just what happens when you finally start fixing things properly instead of patching them. Marisol nodded along, because why wouldn't she? This was a woman who had known her since she was in diapers, who had held her mother's hand through chemotherapy, who had stood beside her at her father's funeral just weeks earlier. She signed the addendum without calling a lawyer, without calling anyone at all outside that kitchen table, without even calling her own sister to ask what she thought. Here is something worth noticing, because Marisol herself didn't notice it until much later, with a clarity that only comes after the fact. Every single major decision in this story so far had been made in her own kitchen, at her own table, surrounded only by the two people who stood to benefit from her signature. No outside advisor present. No second opinion sought. No cooling off period offered or requested. Every signature happened in the exact moment of maximum emotional pressure, with the exact two people who needed her to sign standing right beside her, smiling gently, reassuring softly, patting her hand at precisely the right moment. The third month brought more work, more invoices, more small additions to the original scope that Roy explained away one phone call at a time, each one sounding perfectly reasonable in isolation. New plumbing lines that, while the walls were already open, might as well be replaced now rather than later. A section of subflooring near the back door where they'd found some rot, best handled immediately before it spread further. Each addition sounded logical on its own, almost responsible even. Each one came with Denise present at the table, agreeing, reassuring, filling any silence before Marisol had time to sit with her own quiet doubts about how fast everything kept growing. By this point, the total cost had grown to nearly 3 times the original quote Roy had first handed her in her father's living room. Marisol did the math late one night alone at that same kitchen table, and felt a small, cold knot form in her stomach that she quickly tried to explain away with logic that felt reasonable at 2 in the morning. Old houses are expensive to fix properly, she told herself. This is simply normal. Denise said so herself, and she would know, having lived on this street decades longer than Marisol had even been alive. She went to sleep that night convincing herself the knot in her stomach was only grief talking, not instinct trying desperately to get her attention. Around this same time, something small happened that Marisol dismissed completely in the moment, though she thinks back on it constantly now. A man from the bank called about a notice mailed to the house, something about a filing that required signature confirmation, and when she mentioned it to Denise in passing, thinking she might know something about local paperwork given how long she'd lived there, Denise's expression changed for just a second, a flicker so brief Marisol told herself she'd imagined it. Denise said it was probably nothing, just routine county correspondence that happens whenever a property changes ownership after a death, and Marisol believed her, because why would she not? And she never called the bank back to ask what the notice had actually said. Marisol's sister, Camille, called around this time to check in, the way she did most weeks since their father passed. She lived 3 states away and worked in commercial real estate, had for over a decade, closing complicated deals on properties far larger than a single-family home, the kind of work that had taught her to read contracts the way most people read a grocery list. She asked how the renovation was going, and something in Marisol's voice must have given away more than she intended. Some exhaustion she couldn't quite hide, because Camille immediately asked if she could come visit for a weekend. Just to see the house and check in properly, in person, rather than over the phone. Marisol said yes, mostly because she missed her terribly, not because she thought there was anything in particular to find. If you've ever trusted a neighbor more than a lawyer, more than your own gut instinct telling you something feels slightly off, subscribe right now, because what happens to Marisol over the following weeks is the exact reason she now reads every single document twice, out loud, completely alone, before ever signing her name to anything again. Camille arrived 2 weeks later on a Friday evening. She hugged Marisol tightly at the door, looked around at the half-finished renovation work still scattered through the living room, and then asked, almost casually, if she could see the paperwork sometime that weekend. Marisol pulled out the folder Roy had given her, the original contract and the addendum stacked together, and handed it over the next morning without much thought, expecting Camille to skim it the way she had. Camille sat down at the same kitchen table where Marisol had signed everything months earlier, and started reading slowly, carefully, the deliberate way someone reads a document they've already begun to suspect might hide something. Marisol watched her sister's face change as she read that Saturday morning. Her eyebrows drew together first. She flipped back a page, then forward again, comparing language between the original contract and the addendum with a pen in hand, underlining certain phrases. She was quiet for almost 20 minutes, the coffee between them going cold, and in that silence, the knot in Marisol's stomach that she had explained away so many times over so many weeks finally refused to be explained away any longer. When Camille finally looked up, her face had gone pale in a way Marisol had never seen on her before, and she asked a question Marisol would never forget for as long as she lived. "Do you actually understand what you signed here?" Marisol told her honestly that she understood it was simply for construction cost overruns, the same explanation Roy and Denise had given her at this very table. Camille shook her head slowly and told her it was much more than that, far more. Buried in the dense language of the addendum, worded specifically to sound like standard contractor boilerplate that nobody bothers reading closely, was a lien against the house itself. Not a debt against Marisol personally, not something simple and ordinary, but a legal claim directly against the property, tied to a private loan extended to cover the overages Roy had described so calmly, so apologetically, over the phone months earlier. Camille explained it the way she would to a nervous first-time client, slowly, making absolutely sure Marisol understood every piece before moving to the next. The loan came with a repayment schedule buried 3 pages deep. If a payment was missed, even once, even by a single day, a significant percentage of ownership in the property would transfer automatically to the lender, no additional court process required. Because Marisol had already signed her consent to that exact transfer months earlier without ever realizing what she was agreeing to at that kitchen table with Denise's hand resting warmly on top of hers. Marisol asked, her voice barely above a whisper, who the lender actually was. Camille flipped to the final page, to a small paragraph most people would skim right past without a second thought, and pointed to a company name that meant nothing to Marisol at all, something generic sounding, registered as a private lending entity. Camille pulled out her phone right there at the table and searched the company's registration records, the kind of public filing she knew exactly how to find quickly from over a decade inside real estate transactions. The company had been registered exactly 3 months before Roy first walked into Marisol's father's living room with his clipboard and his folder of professional-looking documents. And the registered agent listed on the incorporation paperwork, the actual name legally responsible for forming that company, was Denise's husband, Harold. A man Marisol had waved to across the fence 100 times over the years without ever really knowing much about what he did for a living beyond something vague involving investments. Marisol sat at her own kitchen table, the one her father ate breakfast at every single morning for 40 years, the one Denise had rested her hand on so many times over these last few months. and felt the floor tilt beneath her in a way that had nothing to do with the renovation work still sitting unfinished upstairs. Denise, the woman who taught her multiplication tables on her porch steps, who held her hand at her father's funeral, who brought soup to her dying mother twice a week for months without ever once asking for anything back, had helped orchestrate a contract carefully designed to slowly take ownership of her parents' house out from under her, one missed payment away from losing a piece of it forever. Camille asked gently, her hand on Marisol's shoulder, if she wanted to confront Denise immediately or wait until they had a proper plan in place with a lawyer already retained. Marisol said she couldn't possibly wait, not even one more night. Some betrayals you can sit with calmly and plan carefully around, and some betrayals demand to be looked in the eye immediately, because the alternative, sitting quietly in your own kitchen pretending everything is normal while the person responsible bakes bread contentedly next door, becomes completely unbearable within minutes of understanding what actually happened to you. She picked up the folder with shaking hands, walked out her front door, and crossed the same yard she had played in as a child, the same grass where Denise once taught her to do cartwheels one summer when she was 9. She knocked on Denise's door, the paperwork still clutched in her hand, her heart pounding in a way she hadn't felt since the moment she first got the call about her father's heart attack. When Denise opened it, wearing an apron with flour still dusted on her hands from whatever she'd been baking that morning, Marisol asked her directly, without any preamble at all, if she knew what was actually written inside that addendum she had sat beside her for while she signed it. Denise didn't deny it. That's the part that still sits heaviest with Marisol even now, years later. She didn't flinch, didn't stammer, didn't reach for some flustered excuse the way you'd expect from someone caught doing something wrong. She simply wiped her hands slowly on her apron, calmly, almost gently, and told Marisol that she and Harold had always loved this particular street, had always felt that this house, Marisol's parents' house, deserved someone who would actually take proper care of it the way it should be cared for. She said grief made people careless, and careless people needed guidance, whether they realized they needed it or not, whether they wanted it or not. She said it like she was doing Marisol an enormous favor. She said it with the exact same warm, patient tone she'd used to teach multiplication all those years ago on her porch steps, as though taking Marisol's house from her piece by piece and teaching a stubborn 12-year-old her times tables belonged somehow in the same category of neighborly kindness. Marisol stood on that porch, the same porch she had done her homework on as a child while Denise checked her work over her shoulder, and understood, fully and completely for the first time, that the woman she had trusted for over 3 decades had never once, in all that time, stopped quietly calculating exactly what she could eventually gain from proximity to her family's grief. Marisol didn't argue with her on that porch. There was nothing left worth arguing, not with someone who had already fully decided her actions were justified long before she ever began putting the plan into motion. She turned around, walked back across the yard on legs that didn't feel entirely her own, and called Camille's personal real estate attorney the moment she stepped back through her own front door. His name was Franklin, a calm, methodical man Camille had worked alongside on complicated commercial deals for years, and he agreed to review everything that very same evening, staying on the phone with her until almost midnight. Franklin called back within 2 days, and what he told her made her stomach turn in an entirely new and different way than it already had. The lien itself, while legally drafted well enough to hold up on paper if left unchallenged, relied entirely on Marisol missing one specific payment deadline, a deadline that had been quietly set for exactly 11 days after the addendum was signed. 11 days, during a month when she was still deep in settling her father's estate, buried under paperwork from the county assessor, the bank, the funeral home, barely checking her own mailbox more than once a week because grief had made even small tasks feel enormous. Franklin told her plainly, without softening it, that the timeline had almost certainly been designed to fail from the very start. 11 days was not some innocent coincidence. It had been calculated with real precision, time to fall during the exact window when a grieving daughter, distracted by 100 other urgent responsibilities pulling her in every direction, would be least likely to notice a single overlooked notice buried among funeral home invoices and probate court letters piling up on the counter. They checked the payment history together immediately, right there on the phone, both of them holding their breath. There were exactly 3 days left before that missed deadline would have triggered the ownership transfer completely automatically. 3 days. If Camille had visited even 1 week later than she actually did, if she had decided to wait another month before checking in on her sister in person the way older sisters sometimes gently do, Marisol would have lost a meaningful percentage of her father's house without ever fully understanding how or why it had happened to her. Buried under paperwork so carefully, deliberately worded that even a genuinely careful reader might have missed its true purpose entirely. Franklin filed a formal legal dispute the very next morning, citing undue influence given Marisol's clearly documented state of grief at the time of signing, along with the deliberately narrow payment window built directly into the loan structure itself. He requested an emergency hold on the lien while the case was properly reviewed, which the court granted within a week, freezing any possible transfer of ownership while the full circumstances were investigated with the seriousness they deserved. The case dragged on for nearly 4 long months after that. Roy's company stopped returning any calls almost immediately once the legal dispute was formally filed, and eventually the business address listed on his letterhead turned out to be nothing more than a mailbox rental service tucked inside a strip mall 2 towns over. No actual office, no actual crew registered anywhere beyond a few day laborers hired for cash. Harold, Denise's husband, tried to argue through his own attorney that the loan represented standard private lending practice. Nothing predatory about it at all, simply a straightforward agreement between 2 consenting adults who happened to know each other. But the timeline told its own story clearly enough for the court to see straight through that argument. The lending company's registration date, exactly 3 months before Roy's very first visit. The rushed signing of the original contract, no cooling-off period ever offered or mentioned. The addendum's language, deliberately buried inside dense construction terminology, designed to discourage careful reading. And the payment window itself, scheduled with what Franklin called in his official court filing a precision entirely inconsistent with coincidence, landing during the exact weeks Marisol was most distracted, most exhausted, and most vulnerable to overlooking a single piece of mail. During this same difficult period, something else came to light that no one had expected. A woman 2 streets over, a widow named Patricia, who Marisol barely knew beyond a friendly wave in passing at the mailbox, reached out to Camille directly after hearing through a mutual acquaintance what had happened. Patricia had lost her husband 2 years earlier under similarly sudden circumstances, and Denise had been unusually attentive to her during that entire time too, checking in often, bringing meals. Eventually recommending a contractor for repairs on Patricia's own aging roof, a contractor who turned out to be Roy. Patricia had signed a similar contract 18 months before Marisol did, though her repairs had ultimately been smaller in scope, and the total numbers involved hadn't grown large enough to actually trigger the same kind of lien structure that had nearly cost Marisol her house. Still, when Franklin carefully reviewed the paperwork Patricia brought forward voluntarily, he found the exact same contractor's name, a slightly different shell company registration but structured almost identically to Marisol's, and a repayment addendum containing clauses that, had her renovation costs escalated the way Marisol's eventually did, would have functioned in precisely the same predatory way against her. Patricia's case wasn't formally part of Marisol's own legal dispute, but her paperwork became powerful supporting evidence within it, establishing what Franklin repeatedly called, both in his filings and in conversation, a clear pattern rather than a single isolated incident born of unfortunate circumstance. It made an enormous difference in how the mediator ultimately viewed the entire situation. This wasn't simply one unfortunate misunderstanding between 2 grieving neighbors and a well-meaning contractor. It was a repeatable structure, built carefully and used more than once, specifically targeting grieving homeowners on a street where genuine trust had been patiently built up over decades. precisely so that trust could eventually be spent when the right moment presented itself. The mediation hearing itself lasted 2 full days. Marisol sat across a long conference table from Denise for the first time since that conversation on her porch, and watched her present herself exactly the way she always had, warm, composed, softly spoken. The same voice she'd used teaching multiplication to a child, now explaining to a room full of attorneys why she had only ever wanted what was best for Marisol and for the house they both loved. For a moment, listening to her, Marisol almost understood how she had gotten away with it for as long as she had, how 30 years of genuine kindness could be weaponized. Weaponized so precisely against the exact person it had once protected. Franklin laid out the full timeline methodically on the second day, document by document, date by date, walking the mediator through every piece with the same patient thoroughness he'd shown Marisol on that first phone call. He brought in Patricia's paperwork as supporting context. He brought in a forensic accountant who had traced Harold's shell company back through 3 separate filings, showing the exact structure of how ownership would have transferred and to which accounts the resulting equity would have eventually flowed. By the end of that second day, there was very little room left for anyone in that room to interpret what had happened as a simple misunderstanding. A mediator eventually voided the lien entirely, citing predatory lending practices along with the deliberate exploitation of a vulnerable party during a well-documented and clearly established period of bereavement. Roy's crew never returned to finish the remaining renovation work they'd left half completed throughout the house. Marisol hired a completely new contractor instead, someone with absolutely no connection whatsoever to her old street, recommended directly by Franklin's office and thoroughly vetted this time, every single document read twice, out loud, alone in her own kitchen, before she ever signed a single page again. Denise and Harold moved away almost exactly 18 months after that conversation on the porch. Their house sold quietly and quickly, with very little explanation given to the remaining neighbors left on the street who had known them for decades. Marisol heard, through someone who stayed loosely in touch with the old neighborhood, that they had attempted something remarkably similar in an entirely different town after that, though it was never personally confirmed. And Marisol made a conscious choice not to spend any more of her own energy chasing down the rest of whatever story followed them there. Marisol still lives in her father's house today. The roof is finished now, properly, by people who never once sat at her kitchen table pretending to be family while quietly calculating what they stood to gain. The garden behind the fence, the very one Denise once helped her plant tomatoes in as a child, still grows every single summer, though Marisol tends it entirely herself now, without Denise, and somehow it grows just as well. The porch light still turns on every single evening at dusk, the same light her father used to leave burning for her whenever she came home late as a teenager, and it still means exactly the same thing to her now that it always did. Patricia and Marisol became genuinely close after everything settled, closer than Marisol ever was with Denise, if she's honest with herself looking back. They have coffee most Saturday mornings now, on Marisol's porch instead of Denise's, and they joke sometimes, carefully, gently, about how strange it is that the woman who tried to take something from both of them ended up giving them each other instead. An unexpected friendship built directly out of the wreckage of a betrayal neither of them saw coming until it was almost too late to stop. Marisol learned something that year she tries to remember every single time someone offers to help her with something she doesn't fully understand herself, whether it's a contract, a financial decision, or simply a piece of advice delivered with total confidence. Kindness that arrives wrapped in urgency, kindness that quietly discourages you from reading the fine print, from calling a second opinion, from taking even one extra day to think something all the way through, isn't really kindness at all. No matter how many decades it took to build the trust it's ultimately spending against you. If this story resonated with you the way we hope it did, tell us in the comments below. Honestly, would you have caught what was happening before Camille did? Or do you think grief would have blinded you the same way it blinded Marisol for all those months? And please subscribe if you haven't already, because next week, we have another story waiting for you about the people we trust the most, and just how far some of them are willing to go when they think no one else is paying close enough attention.